least I've noticed that to be true. Tonight, I'd like for us to look once again, 1 Samuel. Tonight, we're up to chapter 9. I think go ahead and start reading verse 1 here in just a moment. 1 Samuel, chapter 9. When we get to this chapter, we're at that point in Israel's history where they have asked for a king. I pointed out to great pains, the last couple times we met together, when he's asking for a king, or when Israel's asking for a king. They're not asking for the king that God wanted to give them, because God told through Moses that they'd have a king one day. His name would be Jesus. But they decided they wanted to rush God's timetable. And worse than that, they wanted a king to be like the other nations. But even that wasn't their ultimate motive. And I think it's just so important that it's worth mentioning again. They wanted God to supply them someone that they could see and maybe have a little control over, who would lead them out into battle. In other words, they wanted to replace God with a human king, because it had been God's job to lead people out into battle and to lead them into different aspects of life up until this point. And so what it really was about rejecting God. But God is good. God is gracious. He'll sometimes say, "Oh, you think that's what you need? Okay, let's try that for a little while." The Lord knew he was going to send David. Samuel has a lot to do with David. Could very well be called the book of David. But nevertheless, we'll not change or rewrite history. It's 1 Samuel. Tonight we're in chapter 9. It says there was a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son, and my eyes are failing me, the Korath, thank you, the son of Aphiah, of Benjamin. He had a son named Saul, an impressive young man without equal among the Israelites, a head taller than any of the others. Now the donkeys belonging to Saul's father Kish were lost. And Kish said to his son Saul, "Take one of the servants with you and go and look for the donkeys." And so he passed through the hill country of Ephraim and through the area around Shalisha, but did not find them. They went on into the district of Shalim, but the donkeys were not there. They passed through the territory of Benjamin, but they did not find them. When they reached the district Zuph, Saul said to the servant who was with him, "Come, let's go back, or my father will stop thinking about the donkeys and stop worrying about us." The servant replied, "Look, in this town there's a man of God. He is highly respected, and everything he says comes true. Let's go there now. Perhaps he will tell us the way to take." And we'll pause there just for a moment. We're introduced to Saul and his family. We discover that his father was a person of good reputation, respectable, and even important person within his society. It just simply says a man of standing. And his name was Kish. And we understand that he gave his son an assignment, and that's where we meet Saul, this individual who's described as impressive, a young man without equal among Israelites, and just for good measure, pun intended, he was a head taller than everybody else. So he was a tall, good-looking young man, and there was something about him that people recognized as impressive. We see some things about him that he, first of all, he has some promise in him. He's the kind of person that if you had a job, you would look to him. We can put people into two basic categories, those who are leaders and those who are followers. And it would appear that Saul, just given the impressive characteristics that he has, might fit into the category of leadership. However, there's more to leadership than exterior appearances. There has to be something in the heart. In fact, the Lord will speak later on through the prophet Samuel. The Lord will remind us that God does not look at the exterior features. And we can't help but think that he is in some way thinking of Saul when he said that. But God looks at the heart. And so we would be well served just to keep that in mind as we look at the description of Saul, who was impressive, who respected and obeyed his father. His father, Kish, gave him a task to do, and he did not complain about it. He did not feel it beneath him. There were some animals, donkeys, in fact. Donkeys were often associated with royalty. I don't know if that somehow might be a little bit of an indicator of what his future is going to include. But nevertheless, there were some animals who were lost. All right, go find them. Well, they disappeared somewhere, and so he takes some servants, and he goes and he looks for the animals, and he's passing through all this hill country, and he can't find them. So here we see someone who listened to his father, and that's a good thing. He didn't feel the task was beneath him. That's commendable. But unfortunately, he wasn't very good at what he was assigned to do. He can't find the animals. David was a shepherd, and these two are held up side by side for comparison's sake frequently in the book of 1 Samuel. David was a skilled shepherd. Probably he could have found them. That's the implication that is likely here. He could have found them. Saul could not. First assignment that we learn about, and he's unable to do that. But it goes a little bit more than that. As he's out there wandering, he becomes concerned about his father. That's another good thing. And he was working hard at his task. He didn't give up easily. That's a good quality. So he continues, and his servant says, look, there's in this town. All right, we're hanging out here, out in the wilderness, out in this hill country, and there's this town, and the servant says, in this town, there's this guy, and whatever he says always comes true. Well, that's not a very good description of the prophet. But nevertheless, that's oftentimes how people perceive things of God. They don't put the importance to it that it should. He says highly respected. Everything he says comes true. So let's go there, and maybe he can help you. And Saul said to the servant, verse 7, if we go, what can we give the man? The food in our sacks is gone. We have no gift to take to the man of God. What do we have? The servant answered him again and said, look, I have a quarter of a shekel of silver. Obvious start. I will give it to the man of God, bless you, so that he will tell us what way to take. Formerly in Israel, if a man went to inquire of God, he would say, come, let us go to the seer, because the prophet of today used to be called a seer. Good, Saul said to his servant, come, let's go. So they set out for the town where the man of God was. And they were going up to the hill to the town. And they met some girls coming out to draw water, and he asked them, is the seer here? Yeah, he's referring to the prophet. He is, they answered. He's ahead of you. Hurry now. He has just come to our town today, for the people have a sacrifice at the high places. As soon as you enter the town, you'll find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. The people will not begin eating until he comes, because he must bless the sacrifice afterwards. Those who are invited will eat. Go up now. You should find him there about this time. They went up to the town, and as they were entering it, there was Samuel coming toward them on his way to the high place. Now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed this to Samuel. About this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him leader over my people Israel. He will deliver my people from the hand of the Philistines. I have looked upon my people, for their cry has reached me. And when Samuel caught sight of Saul, The Lord said to him, "This is the man I spoke to you about. He will govern my people." Okay. So we see that out there looking for the animals, and his servant says, "Listen, there's this man." It turns out to be Samuel, who's going to be able to tell you what you need to do, and maybe be able to help you. And he's going to get an answer that he did not anticipate. We're also going to see some things about the real character and the future of this future leader. Saul seems oblivious really to what God is doing, and he doesn't seem to be aware of who Samuel is. And that's kind of striking. He should in some way have some understanding. Maybe he never was at the same place where Samuel had been before. Maybe he never even met him face to face. But he should have recognized this great leader of the nation of Israel. It'd be a little bit like today someone who's never heard of Billy or Franklin Graham. Mm-hmm. How do you miss that? If you have even just the least little bit of understanding of what goes on in the spiritual world in this country, in this hemisphere, wouldn't you at least recognize one of those names? And yet he does not. And so there's a clue there. He was also willing to use spiritual things, but he does not appear in himself to be a spiritual person. A lot of times people want God's help, but they do not want his holiness. They're going through life, things are going okay, maybe for a season, and then suddenly something changes. There's tragedy, there's illness, there's uncertainty, and all of a sudden it is the cry, "God, help me." And it doesn't even have to be a religious person or a Christian person who says this. A lot of times you see people who would give no thought of God or even deny God's existence, and all of a sudden they get in a really sticky spot. And what's the first thing to come out of their mouth? "Oh God." It may not be a prayer when they say it, but it sort of sounds like one. Why are they saying that? What brings that to mind? Even though there might be people who have been saved and they've had some kind of a relationship with God, they're just kind of drifting through their life until that difficult spot hits, until that tragedy, until that need comes along, and then they want God's help. "God, get me out of this mess that I got myself into." A mess they might have been able to avoid if they'd been walking with God and talking with him and listening to him and following his way and committing themselves to his way. Maybe they might have missed it altogether. Maybe they brought it upon themselves. Whatever the situation is, or whatever the case is, they cry out, "God, help, help, help." September 11th. How many days? About 60 days. Church attendance. Boom. All over the country. It didn't take long, and it's been a long, hard slide from coast to coast. People just walked away from anything that has to do with the local church in droves. "We need your help." We don't want you. We don't want your holiness. I'll never forget the first time I preached. I was talking about how a lot of times parents and grandparents say the most important thing they want for their children and their grandchildren is to be happy. And God says more than happiness, he wants holiness. Mm-hmm. The irony is that as we pursue that, God gives us a happiness that's unlike any other. True joy and lasting joy as well. Warren Wiersbe said people often use religion to solve their problems. I'm not so sure they're using religion as much as they are superstition, but whatever the case might be. It's not the kind of thing where they're really seeking God or they really want God in their life. They just want to get out of the spot that they're in. And the result is that they're not strengthening their character. And if they get out of that trouble spot, they just go back to the old ways, which kind of leaves God at a distance, not ignored completely. They're not overcoming their sin. They're just simply getting out of that bad circumstance. This is why both leaders and followers need to belong to that local church, strengthen their character, improve their walk with God, really seek to overcome their sin, and encourage others in their own walk with God. Saul was an impressive person on the outside. Young man without equal among the Israelites, taller than anybody else. I mean, he would have been the star forward on Israel's basketball team. All right. He had all the characteristics that would make him popular, that would have given him an open door to success that had been denied to a lot of people. But he is not spiritually impressive. And again, so much of what we read about in Saul's life, and there's a lot of description given to us about Saul, is contrasted with David. You know, when Samuel comes to anoint David, he comes to David's father and he says, "Hey, I'm here to anoint one of your kids." You know, David's father starts with the eldest. Naturally, he would have been, and then goes right down the line and says, "I don't have anybody else." Oh yeah, there's David. Forgot about him. You know, nobody ever thought about David. He was not the impressive head taller than anybody else, but he had a heart for the Lord. That in spite of his failures, and some of them were severe, the Bible describes him as a man after God's own heart. Mm-hmm. He was the king that God would have had them to have at this time in their physical leadership position. Some commentators also look at that comment about the height. And, you know, we recognize even in our culture, height is something that's still held up to be worth something, especially in the sports culture. But the enemies of Israel were known for their height. Think Goliath. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there may be more of a hint here than we realize. Again, there's so much here just to contrast Saul with David. God's just kind of laying it out like, okay, here's the king, like all the other nations, impressive and tall and spiritually empty. Is that what you want? Or a little bit later on, here's David, a man after God's own heart. Who do you want leading? It makes a difference. And the outcome would be different too. Saul would slay his thousands. David his tens of thousands. So when we look at this, it's a reminder that faithfulness is the quality to seek and to develop. That walk with God. Regardless of our circumstances or our outward abilities, what other people see in us or don't see in us. So sometimes we can think that, well, you know, there's nothing special about us, but you know what? If we're faithful and walking with God, there is something special about you. Jesus said it this way. He said, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will be dishonest with much. My goodness, just look at the public realm today, whether it be government or business or sports or wherever. I mean, there are folks that are dishonest. They're not truthful. They don't have good spiritual qualities. They're not good role models. If they can't be trusted with a little bit, if they're going to be dishonest with a little bit, they're going to be dishonest with much. And that's why oftentimes it's very sad when we see people at a very young age have fame and fortune put upon them, because they often do not know how to handle it. And it can wreck lives. But Jesus said the reverse is also true. If you are faithful with a little bit, if somebody can trust you with that $1, then they can trust you with that $1,000 because you're trustworthy. The story goes, Abraham Lincoln once felt like he'd overchanged somebody and walked miles to return or to make up that shortfall. Okay? That's someone who is trustworthy in a little bit. And though he was a tall individual, but otherwise fairly unimpressive and failed at most everything that he attempted to do, God also put him in a pretty special place at an important time in our nation's history as well, because he was, I believe, trustworthy with a little bit, that he could be trustworthy with more. He used that as a principle, and Jesus did, in a parable about stewardship and faithfulness. We understand that. We also see in the parable of the talents, wise, mature servant, Jesus says, well, you've been faithful in this much, I'm going to give you this many kingdoms to take care of. You've been faithful. At the end of all this, his master replies, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a few. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Matthew 25:21 is where that's located. So why would we do anything but aim for faithfulness? Be faithful where God's put you. Be faithful where God has planted you. Do your best with what you have. The open hands, here I am, God, just, whatever your will is, whatever your timing is, that's okay, because God knows what is best, and God always does what is good. And we can trust him with that. Saul gained more responsibility, and it didn't go well. Spoiler alert, just in case you didn't know it. But the point here is that we need to seek that faithfulness to be strong, and God will honor and bless that. And we'll stop there for tonight. Great is his faithfulness, and our faithfulness, we mirror that and give him glory to as well. We have prayer requests tonight. Clyde's gone.